Welcome to the Kelly Sullivan Walden Show, where we explore nighttime dreams, daytime desires, and the best ways to transform the tragic into magic. Because let's face it, we all dream, we all have our blessings, and we all have our challenges, myself included. And I don't want any of us to take any of those things lying down, if you know what I mean. I just wrote a book entitled A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I'm excited to explore the topic with you, whether it relates to your waking or sleeping dreams, because we're dreaming all the time, people. So let's make it the best dream possible. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. I am so excited for today's show. Welcome, dreamers. Okay, so you've all heard of astrology. Hello, of course. But have you heard of astrocartography? I think some of you have, but a lot of people, I was so excited about this show. I've been telling people about this, and they're like, what's astrocartography? I'm like, I know enough to be very dangerous, but I thought I would bring on an expert to talk all about what this is. So let me tell you a little bit about KJ Atlas. And is that not the perfect name for this woman? She was highly recommended, by the way. So I already know she's just brilliant. She's also very beautiful if you're watching the video. Okay. KJ Atlas is a poetic whisperer of energy and the ether. Astrology is the language of nature, and KJ has made it her mission to decode its complexities into something useful, meaningful, and practical. She approaches astrology strategically with a background in science, psychology, and health, and an insatiable curiosity for the human mind. She's a retired nomad and travel enthusiast, an expert in location astrology. P.S. That's what astrocartography is. And she can help you find the best places for you to live and visit based on your unique energy and timing. She also specializes in business astrology, having synesthesia. I hope I'm saying that right. She not only reads your chart, but she feels it and translates it into metaphors and common words. So I am so excited to be with you today, KJ Atlas. Thank you for stopping all the many things that you're doing to be in this location at this time in this place with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So let's just go back to the beginning. How did you first get into astrology and then astrocartography?
I don't think that I chose it. I think that it chose me. And by way of circumstances that I wouldn't have chosen, I started to get really ill when I was 11 years old with symptoms that were 6 years later diagnosed as autoimmune lupus. And you might have noticed that in the spiritual healing community, anything adjacent to astrology, you kind of have to go through a wounded healer journey. And I started mine really early. And that's how I was led to astrology.
So then, and how did you find your way to astrocartography or the location astrology?
Right, because it does seem like there's a huge step of being sick and then becoming a professional astrologer, astrocartographer. And it did take a little while. But healing, you very quickly learn that it's not a physical job only. It's a mental job. It's a spiritual job. You have to have a healthy soul and a healthy mind in order to heal your physical body. And a lot of the challenges that I was facing as I was going through the journey of healing from being ill with autoimmune disease, most of it came from a buildup of emotional trauma from various events in early life that caused me to feel like I didn't have a sense of identity. And astrology is the easiest way to come back home to yourself and find your sense of
Mm.
identity, because it is quite literally a very unique blueprint that reminds you of who you are and what you came here to do, how you should do it, and when you should do it. It's
Mm.
literally your foundation. And then locational astrology adds the piece of, now that we live in a global world where we can much more easily get on a plane, get in a car, move state, move country, we can find places that actually energetically support us a lot more than maybe the place that we were born and live.
Right. I've definitely noticed, I was just traveling, I was just in Europe, and I noticed there was such a feeling in each place. I could just feel a different version of myself come out in each place. So I was mostly in France. I was in France the whole time, but I was in the south of France, in Paris, and then in rural France. And it's like almost like, who's the real Kelly? The Kelly who lives in Los Angeles, or the Kelly that's in France? I've lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico before. I lived in Spain before. And when I can feel into what it was like to be me in those places, and some feel more energetic and empowering, and some feel more draining. So I'm really curious. Is there a method that where you can actually see, like, you like put in somebody's birth information, and then you can see, like, on the globe, these are the places to avoid, these are the places that might be good for you, and then even dial into like a neighborhood and a town? I mean, I don't know, how does that work?
Yes. Yes to all of the above. There's a method. You can go big and say, here's the country, continent, region. You can go really small and say, here's the street. You can do all of it.
Whoa.
And yeah, most people don't know that part, that you can actually make it really micro and figure out exactly where you should live on a very small scale. Once you're like,
Hmm.
okay, I want to buy real estate in this area. Let's go tiny.
Right.
Primarily, most people use it for, let's find the city, let's find the region in the city that best supports, and then we can go much further into detail. And the method is that you have a birth chart that
Mhm.
follows you throughout your life, and it is like a map of your soul. It's an outline of who you are, what you're going to do. And as the ever changing planets and seasons, as I usually refer to it, because it is all seasonal, it all comes in cycles, it all is like a calendar naturally. And as these seasons unfold throughout our lives, we get to know different parts of ourselves that are sort of activated, which is why most people feel like a very different person at
Mhm.
25 and 35 and 45. You get to meet
Mhm.
new versions of yourself. And astrocartography, locational astrology, which is the umbrella term for
Mhm.
astrocartography, because astrocartography is one technique that we use, where we
Mhm.
lay the birth chart out on a map and
Oh,
see,
wow.
where are these personal vortices. So we know there's like the concept of the vortex, where there's different vortices all around the world, but
Mhm.
everyone has their own that are
Ooh.
sort of unlocked or tapped into. So we sort of accelerate the process of discovering all the layers of ourselves the more that we travel and the more that we live in different places. It unlocks it at an accelerated rate.
Oh my goodness. So I'm so curious. And I don't know if you had a chance to run any of my info, because I think it'd be cool just for
I
people to
did.
see. Oh my God, I'm scared and I'm excited.
No,
So we'll go
it'll
ahead.
be
Let's
great.
Because I mean, okay, so let me ask you this first, because I think most people who are feeling, people who have, anybody who's done any inner work to kind of reclaim their intuition, their sense of self, we know when we're with a person, when we're in a place, even in a season, where we shine. Like, we can just feel it because we feel good. We feel that there's like a
Mhm.
flow. We feel like we want to go back there, or we want to avoid that thing. So we don't necessarily need a chart for that. However, I think maybe having a chart can sort of back that up, especially if we're thinking, like you said, about buying real estate, or like
Yes.
changing our whole life, like Emily A. Francis did. By the way, check out Emily, My Malta Life is her website. She's written a number of books. She was the one that told me about KJ. She's like, because I was like, maybe I should move. Maybe I should move to Europe. I don't know. She's like, you must talk to KJ. So, all right.
She's
Oh,
wonderful.
so is there ever a moment where somebody's feeling about a place contradicts with what you see on paper, like with, or, see in your chart for them?
A lot of people do have intuitive pools to go to
Uh-huh.
places where they
Mhm.
need a particular archetype of energy. They all give
Archetype
us
of
all
energy.
the planets.
That's
Yeah,
good.
you like
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's
all
good.
of the lines, the planetary lines that we'll see on an astrocartography map will give us a different flavor. And some of them are more challenging, but I think every human carries the spectrum of light and dark. We all have darkness within us and shadow. We all have light within us. And sometimes we do need to sit and move into the darkness of ourselves to uncover it, heal it, get to know it, and
Mm.
integrate shadow. So I have
Oh,
had clients sometimes come to me and say, I really want to go to this place, or this place. And they're all on a Pluto line, which is about excavating your shadow and healing past traumas. And I was like, hold on, are you are you trying to heal something? Do you need to get over a breakup? Do you need to move on from a divorce or healing from a past career? Because that's what a Pluto line would do. But I also wouldn't
mm.
recommend staying there for a long time, years and years.
And I don't know. I mean, I imagine that it's not as vague as this, but could you say that like all Leos should live in sunny climates and all Tauruses need to I mean, is there anything that's in general for all of the 12 signs of the zodiac?
I
No.
wish. No,
Wouldn't that be
no.
nice?
It,
Stay away from the
I
ocean,
wish.
go to the ocean, be in the mountains, right?
I mean, you can say at some points, I actually think there's one part in the natal chart that's very specific to the type of environment. And so that's something
Mm.
kind of separate from astrocartography. And
Oh,
there's 12 houses in a chart that rule different
right,
areas of life. And the
right.
fourth house of the chart rules your home and your sanctuary. And so a lot of times the quality of what's ever going on in the fourth house will tell you what type of
Mm.
environment you like. Like I have an
Oh,
Aries fourth house and I love the desert, like hot, dry, that Aries Martian kind of energy. And people with
interesting.
a Cancer might want to be near the ocean. Same with like Pisces,
Wow.
so there's a little bit of that, but it's not based on sun sign. It's usually maybe the moon sign or the fourth house
Ooh.
quality.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm curious. Anything you want to tell me about my stuff, just so we can see if we can have some people sort of map themselves onto what a reading with you
Yeah.
would be like? Because you do
Well, I
private
always
readings,
start
by the
with the
way. You do
chart.
personal. So, and
I
be the
do.
people can find you at kjatlas.com and they can book
Yes.
sessions, individual groups or just individuals.
Individuals and I'll say family units, which can look very different depending on your family, but we'll say family units. Maybe you're traveling with a roommate and your dog, and maybe
Okay.
it's your spouse, maybe your children. But yes, groups limited to a small amount because we go really in depth and we look at the natal chart, we look at timing, we look at the astrocartography
Oh
maps,
my God.
a lot of things. So I pull about 6 charts per person when we do a
Whoa.
session. So I pulled a couple of those for you.
Oh
And
Lord.
I always start with the chart. And if I have this correctly, you are very much a Leo, but you have an Aquarius moon and a Libra rising. Did you know
Hmm.
this?
Yes.
So you're born under a full moon.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is
I
very
didn't know the full
dynamic.
moon.
People who are born under a full moon are
Oh.
very special people. And part of your path is about integrating the head and the heart and having lots of different experiences and bringing things to full fruition, really strong manifesting energy when you have a full moon. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Wow.
it's dynamic. There's a lot of very famous people that have full moons because they're good at bringing things to manifestation, bringing things to culmination, and
Of all the
live very
astrology charts
dynamic,
I've ever
interesting
done, nobody's
lives.
ever brought up the full moon piece before. So that by like right out of the
Interesting.
gate is an interesting piece. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I also noticed that you have Capricorn ruling your fourth house that I was mentioning is like the sanctuary piece. And
Oh.
something about Capricorn that I'll hear is like a lot of people like to be or like to have a nature sanctuary where,
Mhm.
you can go out and kind of be in the mountains or be uh, sort of isolated in like a hermit space and go
Mm.
back and forth between your very Leo, Libra, bubbly social energy, but then have that sanctuary that you can go and work and meditate and hermit to
Mm.
recharge.
Ooh, that's exactly where I live right now in Topanga. I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by trees but I'm in LA, so I'm only, a half an hour or 20 minutes from any of the bustling places. So,
Yeah.
and I love being here,
Yeah.
but I do want to travel
That
and
would
maybe
make
live
so
other
much
places.
sense. Well, what's interesting is you were born in LA and then you live in the LA area. And so
Mhm.
when you live in a place that you were born, your relocated astrology chart is actually your birth chart. And
Mm.
I don't know if this is true for you, but you have some signatures related to LA that means there's some what might feel like past life energy, ancestral, sort of karmic connections, especially with relationships and people that you meet in and
Mm.
around LA. And almost as if you've been around the block a few times in the life cycle history in the LA area
Oh,
specifically.
interesting.
And what I'm
Okay.
particularly looking at is the nodal configuration, like North Node, South Node, something
Hmm.
that Jan Spiller, one of my teachers, wrote about very extensively. The North and South Node, and the South Node indicates where you've had past lives and what the quality of that is. Should you entertain that idea? If you don't entertain the idea of past lives, it can have a lot to do with family ancestry and the karma surrounding that.
Okay, I'm gonna need to go back and re-listen to everything you just said because I suddenly went like out of my mind. So I think you said something true, but I'm like it blew my mind. So I
Okay.
like what the hell did she just say? Past lives, family. Okay, got it. Great. Thank you.
There's your soul is deeply in the soil of LA. We'll put it that way, whether it's spiritual or biological.
Okay.
There's deep connection
How
in the
bizarre.
granularity of the space here. Yeah.
Okay.
When I started to look at other places around the world, because you had mentioned Europe, when you were there, did you feel more connected to your sense of spirituality and the mystical, creative side of yourself?
Um, Phew. Not necessarily any more than I normally do. I mean, and maybe it's because I'm here, I'm in LA as we speak, and this is so I have kind of more of a routine while I'm here. While I was traveling, it was a little bit like there were some moments, but not not extraordinary, nothing that totally struck me. But I wasn't there leading. Normally when I go places, I take people on like a sacred pilgrimage. This was different. There was other things that we were doing, kind of scoping things out, but why?
Yeah. Well, it's one of the major lines, which is what we look at on the astrocartography map, is a
Hmm.
purple line that's the Neptune line. And Neptune is the planet of spirituality and creativity. And it's also the planet of flow and ease and the intuitive brain. So
Mm-hmm.
when you spend time on a Neptune line, I always say it's really good for retirement, actually. And it's really good for people in spiritual careers. It's
Oh,
not good if you're
interesting.
trying to meet hard deadlines because there is more of this flow and ease and retreat and relaxation energy where you might feel connected to your creative side, your spiritual side, but there's no demand feeling.
Exactly. I felt completely yin while I was in
That
France in
tracks.
particular. Just I felt like I don't need to write one more book ever. And I've got a bunch of ideas for them and maybe I'll write them, maybe I won't. And then as soon as I got back to LA, I'm like, write that book, do that thing, make that list. I'm like, what? There is an archetype in each place. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
interesting just being here I can feel this pulse. When I go to the Midwest, where my husband's family's from, I feel very different. It's like, so it is, yeah, I'm kind of schizophrenic, I guess, where I'm very different in different places. And maybe that's how we humans are.
I think we all are. Yeah, we all
Yeah.
unlock different parts of ourselves. And I even think of the theory of what if we're meeting different, almost like parallel dimensions of ourselves, like the different possibilities,
Ooh.
like based on our free will choices.
Oh, that's intense.
Who would I be if I had stayed in college at Savannah College of Art and Design and opened a photography studio in Savannah? Like, who would I be? Who would I know? How would my life be so different versus the trajectory I did take moving to the West Coast? I would still be the same
Right.
person, but still very different.
Exactly. It's like one of those choose your adventure books. I just wish we had like
Yeah.
an app for that. Like we could literally see that version of ourselves and then go, I'll pick option 25. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that was basically all of Europe. I mean, like, because there's a very strong pull for us to go to France, to not necessarily live there full time, but I don't know. Does that seem
Well, what's
wise or not?
interesting is it's not over the entirety of Europe, but it does primarily move through the area surrounding Monaco, up through Switzerland, up through Frankfurt, and all the way up north into close to Oslo. And I would say when you have a line like this, then you can get more micro and start looking at
Okay.
crossing lines, which are known as parans. And then you can look at relocated charts,
Mm,
gather more information. But
wow.
there are some favorable lines in the Côte
Okay.
d'Azur region, like the coastal region of
Oh,
France. And there's also some favorable lines in the northern part of Portugal, should that be somewhere that you look, and maybe the
interesting.
southern part of Spain.
Oh, I love southern Spain. Okay. Interesting. All of that is okay. So also does that connect with what you were saying about there being more of a not I don't like the word retirement, but like the creativity and spirituality.
I personally love the idea of retirement.
I hate it. Oh, that word is just
the
like, okay, that's not my world. But I like the idea of flow and to not be in like
flow,
the hustle all the
rest,
time. Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To not be in the hustle. And that is something that is over a majority of the part of Europe. You might feel less of that if you were to go towards Eastern Europe or even through Italy or Croatia. And from, let's say, Frankfurt West,
Mm.
you have a Neptunian influence that is more creative, more flowing, more spiritual, less American hustle culture. Do you get what I mean?
I completely get what you mean. I absolutely do. Okay, so with all of this, I want to get back to the other people, even though I hope you all are getting a sense of what you will get in a session with KJ. But so let's just say I packed up and moved to France, and then 5 years later, does time change the kind of the resonance of where certain places are? Like your well-being in a certain place. So in does that change in time?
Your map never changes, but time
Okay.
changes you and your natal
Mm,
chart. So you
mm,
go through different phases and chapters and cycles of life that might call for you to move to France. And you might say, oh, wow, this is really aligned and
mm,
resonant. And
mm,
then in 5 years, you could undergo a transit where suddenly you're like, I've had a lot of flow and I'm just, my body, my mind, my spirit is really not craving this. I feel like I need to tap into a new energy, a new version of myself. It's time to kind of move along. You could do that by place, or you could do it by creating a series of action events in your life. Could be starting
mhm.
some type of business. If you're like, okay, I'm really craving some hustle, you can
Uh,
really create hustle in your life by saying, I'm going to open a restaurant. That's a good example.
right.
Um, You don't necessarily have to move places, and it will never change. You will always have that Neptunian energy in Europe. You also have some great energy in Greece that would be like a
Mm.
feeling at home, and also in more northern Greece and up through like Bulgaria, Romania. That could be a good place to write your books if you're in Europe and you're like, I need more of this drive to write books and sit at
Mm.
the
Oh,
desk.
wow.
If you were
Wow.
to take a little weekend train ride over to the eastern side of Europe, you might have a
Hmm.
little bit more of that mental energy, the stimulation that you need.
So there's the place and what it represents archetypally. So we could say that for anybody coming to LA, there will be more of a plugged into some of that yang energy, that hustle, that creativity. And anybody moving to, let's say, the south of France, there might be more ease and calm. Or is that not the case? Might it be crisscrossed for other signs or other?
Culturally, there's always going to be an influence, you know,
Yes,
like
right.
we have to think about that. And that is a factor because, yes, France and Spain definitely have more of a let's take a siesta and not talk about work on the weekends kind of
And let's have
attitude,
3 hour
whereas
lunches in
everyone
the
works in
middle of the
LA.
week. Right, exactly. We don't have lunch
So
breaks
there
here.
that's a factor. Mhm.
Yeah.
It is a
Uh,
factor. But you might see where someone has the archetypal planetary energy of hustle in Spain, and they might be there running around, opening up restaurants, opening up businesses,
that's true.
being very busy and stimulated, even though that's not what their neighbors and the rest of the culture is doing. So it is an individual experience.
It's so funny. When I was in Spain a few years ago, I remember thinking, wow, everybody here is so mellow. There was this guy who was our favorite waiter at our favorite restaurant, and he would just belt out into like bust into song, and he had the most Pavarotti-esque kind of voice, and I was like, why aren't you famous? I'll be your agent. I'll book you here, but and he was like, nope. I am happy being a waiter. I get all my time off. I have blah, blah, blah. I don't want to. I was like, oh, what? Oh my God. And everybody I met
Yeah.
was like that except one woman, one very enterprising woman had all these different beauty places like nail salon, hair salon, blue. And she was just like, book. I'm like, she's like the one person that was on, that
Yeah.
had a schedule, didn't take lunch breaks. But okay, so I guess to your point.
She would fit in very well in New York or LA.
Exactly. But she, had, anyway, she created places for people to come and get held in a more yin place, but those were her businesses. So,
Yeah.
okay, interesting. So you mentioned something about business, and I know, everybody, many people who are watching or listening to this would be curious. So, how does astrology or astrocartology help to inform what people should do for a living or where they should do what they do for a living?
It can answer all of those questions. So first of all, to answer what should you do, there's a couple of different things that we can look at. Different houses of the chart represent different kinds of work that you would do
Mhm.
and the quality of what that should be. And then I'm really practical and I'm like, okay, if you have a Cancer midheaven, which is the career point, we can talk about what that might look like in different, throw out different ideas. Like you might be a great teacher, you might be a chef, things that provide nourishment and nurturing. You might be a great storyteller or scriptwriter because you have an emotional intelligence to be able to connect with people. So we can kind of look at a lot of different factors and see what are you supposed to do and how are you supposed to do it and what do you want to do? And then we can look at different places in the world and say, here's where this comes to life a lot more. Like one thing in particular is that if you look at the map, the astrocartography map, you'll see a lot of different colored lines. And at the top, on the external part of the map and the bottom part of the map, you'll see these little initials that say AC, IC, DC, and MC. And those are the four main areas of life: you, your family, your home, your partner, and your career. And so there's four different sun lines, there's four different moon lines, there's four different Pluto
Mm,
and Neptune and all of these. And
whoa.
so you in France are on a Neptune career line, which is why you're probably feeling less of the grind and hustle, more of the flow, more of the creativity, because that go, go, go in your career is being tempered and becoming more gentle with the energy of yin Neptune. And it's affecting your career mostly more than your relationships or your home life versus another line that might be more affecting of your relationships and home or yourself and your physical health.
I don't know if this relates here, but I want to say just an interesting aside regarding the yin and the yang energies. While I was in France and I was there for 6 weeks, I really didn't do anything. I led a couple of workshops while I was there, and I had a few clients that I saw, but for the most part, I just went with the flow. And there were so many things that happened during that time that kind of came to me. There was a book award that I won. There was a newspaper that, like, a newspaper in France did a big feature on. There was like so many kind of milestone special things happened when I wasn't hustling. And I was like,
Yeah.
hmm, wait a minute. Do less, accomplish more, as the Taoists say, and then take it to the extreme, do nothing and create everything or allow everything.
Yeah.
So I wonder, hustling doesn't necessarily, I mean, I think sometimes in the hustle, we can get in our own way. I mean, maybe that's like a whole other
Yeah.
conversation. Hustling doesn't necessarily mean being productive. I mean, it might mean planting seeds and then later when you let go, some things that you planted in the fall kind of or whatever in the spring, they show up in the fall. But I don't know, do you find that
Yeah.
sometimes in the not hustling, there is manifesting? Or as I would
Oh,
maybe call it,
absolutely.
dreamifesting.
Absolutely. Especially relationships is a good one. I have friends who are like, why can't I just find my person? And when you're so blind, like we have our blinders on and you're so focused on let me find that person, and they're in your peripheral and you can't see it because you're looking so hard in one direction. Then all of a
It's
sudden
so
you take
true.
a step back, you start creating a life you love, and then they just pop in.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, that
Yeah.
is.
It's something, it says something about the energetics of this universe we're living in.
Well, whatever we're wanting, the state of wanting is actually like, I don't have the thing I want. So, in some way,
Mhm.
there's a pushing it away. And when you're like,
Like an
okay, here we go.
anti-magnetism.
Exactly like a repulsion. Like you
Hmm.
are in a state of wanting. So, let's keep you wanting because that's what you're living and breathing. But when you're like, because I never felt more full than when I was in France, when I wasn't doing anything. I felt like my enough o meter was full. I didn't feel like I had to do
Wow.
anything. And so
Hmm.
there was like, well then okay, here's this book award, here's this thing, like kind of an an extension of fullness sort of showed up,
Yeah.
not based on pushing anything, which was
There's
interesting.
one thing I'll say about that that makes it different per person too, is when you look at the birth chart and you get to know someone through their birth chart and who they are and what they do. From what I know, you're a person who has very much integrated Neptunian energy. You work in the
Mm,
dream space, you work with manifestation and spirituality. If you put a
mm,
surgeon or a defense attorney on a Neptune line who has probably never done anything in that realm, stereotypically, it's
yeah.
going to feel very jarring. So for you, you're like, oh, I didn't feel anything more than usual. You've really integrated Neptune and you're experiencing the flow of
Oh,
Neptune
I
versus
like
it could be
that.
very jarring for some people.
Oh, that is so interesting. Okay, so as you've been and doing this work with astrology and astrocartology and the business astrology, let's just focus on astrocartology. What might be one of the most bizarre or interesting things that you've like that maybe you've been surprised by, or that's just kind of blown your mind? Is that,
I think
is
my
there anything
discovery
that's
of it
shocked
blew my mind because
you?
I had a very difficult and interesting, unique childhood. I grew up in a town of about a population of 300 people.
Wow.
And I, my father was an alcoholic. There were a lot of things. And I was like, why are things so difficult for me? Why did I get sick so early? You know,
Ooh.
why was I a sick child? Why were these there were so many challenges. There were so many challenges that were different from what I saw other people dealing with. And then
Mm.
when I moved away for the first time, I felt a lightness and an ability to heal and move forward that
Ooh.
I couldn't put my finger on it. And then when I discovered astrocartography, I, I felt like my mind blew open because I was living on a Saturn line. And Saturn is like old grandfather, restrictive, challenging, brutal energy. And so it made me grow up fast. It made me have to learn street smarts, the rules of the road, how to survive really, really early. And Saturn does that. It made me grow up extremely fast. And
Wow.
then when I moved to my sun line in Dallas, Texas, that supported my relationships, I met a Leo who became my partner. We're still together. And I started to heal and find my sense of identity on this sun line. And I got a great job. And all these things started to shift and change. And I was like, oh my God, there is something to this. And everywhere I've ever traveled, I've experienced this firsthand. Then I got into the nomad community and I met people who've
Oh
been to
yeah.
45 countries. And that was the greatest experiment. So I was like, tell me everything about these experiences. Let's unpack it. And it just really never fails when you go deep. If you, when you look past the archetype of what it is on the surface, like the Googleable meaning of it, and you really start to
Mm.
get to know how does it show up for that person, it really never
Hmm.
misses.
Oh, that is so interesting. So how are your symptoms now, if you don't mind me asking, since you've moved to, and you're
Well,
in
what's
LA right
absolutely
now?
crazy, I am. So
Oh,
I lived in Dallas and then I lived in Portland, Oregon for five
okay.
years.
Uh-huh.
And I moved to LA about a year and a half ago. I spent some time in 10 different cities in Mexico. I nomaded around for a couple of years
Okay.
and traveled a lot. But I live in LA now. I live here permanently. After moving to the West Coast, so when I lived in Portland, I I had always had a positive ANA, which is the indicator of having lupus. It's the first thing that they test. It's a blood test, and it's an autonuclear antibody. That means your immune system is on um, basically on high drive.
Ah.
And there is no way to reverse it, but they give you medications that kind of try to temper it, all of these things. But they told me I was going to be on these medications for the rest of my life. I was going to have joint pain, dry eye. My hair was going to fall out in clumps, like all of these things. And I was going to have to figure out how to manage symptoms, probably jump around different drugs because different drugs can harm you in different ways. I was on one that could put holes in your retina. So it was just kind of chaotic.
What? Whoa.
It's a puzzle when you're trying to heal those things. And so when I went to Portland, within 1 year of being there, the furthest place in the continental US that I could be away from the Saturn line, and I was on in some lunar energy. Lunar energy is very healing.
Mm.
I went to the doctor and they did my ANA test, and she said it has reversed. I have never seen a patient
Oh,
do this. I've never
what?
seen, and she was like, unless it was a false positive. I said, well, it wasn't because I had it tested when I was 11, 14, 16, 18, like every year from 17 onward, they would test it, and I constantly had it. And then when I went there, I was 22. And that was the first time in like 10 years that I didn't have this autonuclear antibody positive. And then they tested it again and again, and it was fine. And all my symptoms were virtually gone. They're mostly gone. I would say I have like maybe a little inkling of something, you know, if I have like a weekend traveling and where there's wine and there's gluten and there's inflammatory things, of course you're gonna have a reminder, but it's extremely manageable, extremely livable, and I don't take any pharmaceuticals for it.
Isn't that is truly miraculous. That is amazing. And I
Yeah.
don't want to necessarily make this leap globally, no pun intended, but perhaps we could say that if anybody is chronically ill, or like of the body or even of the mind. I know a lot of people they're struggling with mental illness or like just having a difficult time with anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
Perhaps they might come to see you to find where they would be closer to a lunar line, or they might even just move. They might even like maybe, I mean, of course we want to send as many people to you as possible, but some people might not be able to afford it. So maybe they could explore their own passion or curiosity. Like if you look at a map, what makes you
Yeah.
light up? And maybe if you can, not everybody can also just pick up and travel and go. But
Yeah.
is so if somebody wanted to just kind of do like the sampler plate, might they go to a few places, or like take a month or a week and spend a few days here and there to see where they feel lighter? For example, a
Yeah.
friend of mine who moved from LA to France had debilitating arthritis, and her arthritis is gone in France. Like she doesn't have it, period.
Wow.
It's gone. And it's like she didn't do anything different. She's not taking any supplements. It's just being in a certain place. I mean, it could be that there's less toxins or who knows, but
Right.
so did I make that
Yeah.
leap?
I
Is that
think,
too much? And by the way, consult your doctor. Don't take anything I'm saying for sure. Don't hold us liable,
yeah.
but explore if you've tried everything else, then try what KJ is suggesting.
Well, I'll reframe it a little bit through what you're saying is correct. And I'll reframe it a little bit through like a practical lens of it's
Sure.
very difficult to heal in an environment where the circumstances made you ill. Whether it
Oh,
and I think our emotional disposition, our emotional radar of where we're at in life has so much to do with physical healing. And then we know that it has stuff to do with mental healing from
yeah,
depression, anxiety, things of that nature.
right.
And I'm not saying the planets cause this, they don't cause things. It is uh, a way to describe a particular energy frequency that lives within us. I think we all have the potential to become depressed, become sick, become ill. And when
Absolutely.
we're
Oh,
in a
yeah.
place that
Yes.
really dredges that up, it's hard to heal. You can do all the things, the green juice, therapy, uh, fasting, whatever it is you want to do. You can do all of it, and you're still not going to feel good if you're mentally and emotionally in a place that doesn't support it. And so, what I would say is, first of all, if you're chronically ill, I know traveling is very difficult firsthand. I know that can be
For
very hard.
sure. Right.
One thing I would look at is called the local space map, and you can literally Google local space astrology map, and you can put it over your hometown. You can put in your town that you live in, and you can find different lines in the neighborhood that can be healing. And if you can't leave your house,
Oh,
go spend times in these areas. Go find healing spas or yoga classes or
or a garden or a
parks
park.
and
Right.
nature. Yeah, in
Oh,
areas where you have
interesting.
a moon line, a Neptune line, a sun line, a Venus line. Some of the things that I would look out for and avoid, especially if you have chronic illness, emotional challenges of any kind, are Pluto lines. They're black and they have a little P at the top.
Mm.
Mars lines, which are red, and they have the little traditional masculine symbol of the circle with the arrow
Mm-hmm.
through the top or top
Mm-hmm.
right, and
Mm-hmm.
Saturn lines, which on the astrocartography map are going to show up as a burgundy brown, and it looks like a little H with a line through the
Mm.
top. And I was living on a Saturn line. I actually live on a
Ah.
Mars line here in LA, but my Mars line
Mm.
is so much more tempered because my Mars is in Taurus. So it's a very
Mm.
passive Mars, and it helps
Mm.
me organize business and get things done, but it doesn't show up as much as chronic illness problems as my Saturn
Mm.
line did. But I will
Mm.
say that I have a few more symptoms here than I did when I was in Portland and didn't have that that
Whoa.
Mars energy. Because when I moved
Oh.
here, I started to get some like allergic hive rashes. And I was like, that's kind of weird. And they're minor things that
Mm-hmm.
I've been here a year and a half and I haven't had anything severe. Um, I have more like TMJ jaw pain from the Mars hustle energy of living in LA that I have here, much more
Mm.
so than when I was in Mexico and when I was in Portland. But they're manageable. It's like the trade-off I get of like
Mm.
the energy to put into business and the energy I have to do other things is worth that at the stage of life that I'm in.
Oh, that is so interesting, the little trade-off. And I thought going back to something you said at the beginning was interesting. Like when somebody was saying, I want to move here, here, and here. And you're like, are you in a healing phase? Because maybe living in a Pluto or Mars or Saturn line place, maybe like maybe that struggle, there's a purpose in that. Maybe the people who are
Yeah.
where they are and they can't move, they can't get a session, they can't go somewhere else, then maybe the notion
Yeah.
is, why don't you be here? Because maybe there's some clearing some past karma, or like taking a deep dive on behalf of all humanity to understand that
Yeah.
pain. So maybe we can find
Yeah.
purpose where we're at. If we can't move, then let's make this as purpose
Yeah.
filled and as beautiful as it can possibly be. Are there some cures that you can bring into your space to
Yes.
offset some
Yes.
of
I'm
those
so glad you
energies?
asked this. So, astrological remedy is a thing that you can do with your birth chart, and you can do it with astrocartography. And
Okay.
you can get really creative with it. It feels very artistic.
Ooh.
For some people, it might seem very woo woo and like that's kind of silly, but it's all kind of in the same theory of like how colors can influence a space and how maybe crystals can
Oh.
influence a space. And so, one thing that I did when I moved to my Mars line is having Mars energy, which would be like a red door or red art or like a cactus,
Ah.
something that has that assertive yang energy in
Ooh.
my space. So I did more of that than what I have in other places. There's also long distance astrocartography. Like I have a wall over here of all these different cities that
Oh.
represent places where I have good lines for career and for
Ooh.
identity and prosperity. Like Athens, Greece, I have a Jupiter line there. And so I have a poster that says Athens, Greece to
Oh.
bring in that energy in my space to
Oh my
counterbalance.
God. Okay, that's amazing. You'll appreciate this. I've got the chills as I start to even think about this. A dear friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, Claire Wineland, who was
Oh, I
chronically
know
ill.
her.
You know Claire? Oh my God, did you ever get
Yeah.
to meet her?
No,
Oh my
no,
God.
she impacted so many people.
Oh, she did. I got to work with her, and she was just a sacred, sacred soul. And I'm covered in goosebumps as we speak. A big, big dreamer. If anybody doesn't know who Claire Wineland is, just do a Google search or look up. There's a movie about her called Claire, and it's a YouTube produced it. So she had to
Wow.
spend a lot of time in the hospital with cystic fibrosis, and she
Mhm.
was famous for bringing in, making her hospital room look like a New York loft. She had this
Yes.
wallpaper that looked like bricks, and she would put
Yeah.
that all like panels all around. She would bring in fairy lights and fuzzy rugs and big beautiful blankets and posters and music, and she would make it look like she was like, I'm living in New York on my own. I'm an artist in New York. And you felt like you were with an art in an artist's loft in her friggin' hospital room. And she
Wow. I forgot
outlived, I
about
mean,
that.
she was only supposed to live, I mean, every year they said this is it. And she lived way past that. She wasn't supposed to live past 5 or 6, and she lived until she was, I think, 21 or 22. So there's something about, then make your place the best place it can be. If this is where you have to be.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I would love to know if she had beautiful astrocartography in New York City. That is such a beautiful example.
Yeah, like bring
Wow.
it, bring in a little Paris, or bring in a little Italy, bring in a little
Yeah.
Spain, bring in some whatever that
Yeah.
is into your space. And
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you knew Claire. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Hi,
Oh,
Claire.
wow.
Yeah, I've got
That's so
yeah,
amazing.
she's very, everybody go to what is it? It's clairesplacefoundation.org. That's the her mom and dad keep it running, and it's to help
Mm-hmm.
families that are struggling with cystic fibrosis, and Claire is the poster child. She brought so much joy and beauty to this world,
Wow.
just like you, KJ. Oh my God, your
Oh,
work
thank you, Kelly.
is so beautiful, and I feel so blessed to have had this time with you. I know we're wrapping up, coming to an end here, but I want to make sure people have the right info to be able to reach out to you. Is the best place kjatlas.com for all things KJ?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very active on my Instagram. Historically, I've been kind of pulling back a little bit, taking a break because mentally social media is a lot, so take breaks. But I am there if you're there. So send me a message, give me a follow. I love to chat it up on Instagram, but for all serious things, my website is the best place.
KJ Atlas, which is the perfect name. Oh my God, I love that. That's not your given name, but that's your chosen name. Is that true?
It is for various reasons, but the
Yeah.
number one thing is that I was actually born on the day that the sun crosses over from Taurus to Gemini, and I was always kind of confused as a child, which one am I? And what's funny is
Oh,
that I have personal planets in both signs, so I feel very connected to both Taurus and Gemini. And
wow.
the Atlas star is a fixed star within those constellations, and I would always look up at it because where we are in the world, we can see a lot of the stars in the Taurus constellation. Um, Most evenings, usually in the early part of the evening in the summertime. I was actually looking at it this weekend when I was out in Palm Springs, like, oh, I'll look up there. There's, Taurus doing its thing. Um, so the Atlas star is really close to a lot of my own personal planets in my
Oh,
chart. And I
that's
had always
great.
been looking up at it. And
Wow.
yeah,
That's so interesting. So, any parting words from you? Any last message you'd like to leave my listeners or viewers with?
I always say, keep getting to know your birth chart, get to know your moon sign. Your moon sign is the most intimate part of
Mm.
you. Lead with your moon sign first. Don't
Ooh.
abandon it. We often feel like, oh, our moon sign is such an annoyance because it's our emotions, but it's our inner child. So get to know your moon sign and love it and nurture it as you would a baby. Take care of that side of you and keep getting to know your charts and yours. And don't just do it online. Go outside and look up. Go out into nature and
Mm.
just look up at the sky because it's our greatest calendar. It
Mm.
if all digital things were to go away tomorrow, we would still have a time tracker just by looking up at the sky. It's our natural circadian rhythm. So if you ever feel overstimulated in a big city or isolated out in the jungle, you can always look up.
Oh, that is gorgeous. You can always look up KJ Atlas. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank
This has
you,
been so
Kelly.
illuminating and soulful on so many levels. I feel so blessed. And thank you again, Emily A. Francis, for this wonderful recommendation. So
Yeah.
everybody check out My Malta Life as well. KJ Atlas, thank you so much. And for all
Thank
you
you, Kelly.
listening or
You're a
watching,
pleasure.
oh, thank you, honey. All right. Until we meet again, don't take your dreams lying down, and don't take your astrology lying down either. Thank you for listening to the Kelly Sullivan Walden Show. If you enjoyed this episode, take a moment to like, subscribe, comment, and share it with your friends. My show can be found on Apple iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to order my new book, A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste, go to your favorite online or brick and mortar retailer, then head on over to kellysullivanwalden.com tragic to magic. Input your order number and redeem your bonus gifts. I'm also excited to be offering a DreamWork practitioner training. So if that calls to you, go to kellysullivanwalden.com/dreamwork. If you'd like to join me for the live recording of these shows, most Wednesdays at noon Pacific, you can find me on Facebook at Kelly Sullivan Walden Dreams. If you have a question about your dreams or about how to transform your tragic into magic, email me at kelly@kellysullivanwalden.com. Until next time, remember, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
And as you awaken to the power of your dreams, you make the world a lighter, brighter, more beautiful place, one dream at a time. Sweet dreams.